Happy Thursday, weirdos. I'm Mackenzie, and I am joined, as always, by...
I'm Sarah.
I'm Chris.
And this podcast is for weirdos. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about my favoriteest ever mythological being. Not really, I wouldn't say it's a cryptid. I don't think it falls in the cryptid category, but solid like mythological beast fantasy creature.
Okay.
Dragons.
Ooh. Me and Chris are on the same page.
Thoughts, feelings, vibes? How do you feel?
I don't know if I necessarily believe that dragons are real.
Okay.
Like I don't know if I believe that they've ever have existed, but I also don't know if I can say that reasonably because every freaking culture out there has some version of a dragon.
Right.
I do love a dragon. I have collected them for, 13 years at this point. Every time I've gone to a Renaissance fair, I always come home with a dragon. I think the most recent years are the only times that I haven't come home with a dragon because I've gone more than once. But I used to, accidentally would be like, oh, I'm going to buy this thing, and then it has a dragon on it. Like, I'm just drawn to them. They're so fun.
Yeah, agreed. I love dragons. I think they're really fun. I don't think that dragons exist. I want them to exist, but I don't think that they do for a couple of reasons. I think they're too big to be
right. We kind of talked about that in the Nessie episode of what is this thing eating?
What is this thing eating? And it's my big problem when watching shows like Game of Thrones or whatever. I look at these dragons and I'm like, what does that thing eat? How is there enough food to support an animal that large? But I do agree that so many different cultures have this idea of a dragon, even though they're all different. They all kind of fit into what we would call a dragon. But I do think that at least some have natural explanations, like oarfish, spooky really long fish that are crazy and really rare.
Could be a dragon.
Could be a dragon.
Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of weird animals that maybe are just rare and happen to coincide with odd events happening, and that gets coined as a dragon.
Cool.
But I wish they exist. They're so cool. I love dragons.
I'm just gonna to give a little bit of history of me and dragons. Much so I am a nerd.
Said with love.
I was raised. My dad has always been. Both of my parents. I was encouraged to read a lot. As both of you know well, I do nothing but read all the time. I read a lot of fantasy, and I was raised reading a lot of fantasy books. That was my dad's preferred genre of book. I remember specifically there was a set of books that I think a lot of our generation or our kind of cross-generation of people will know when I say this. The ology books, dragonology, piratology, wizardology, Egyptology. All of the wonderful I think there was a fairyology.
Yes.
Yes.
There was also an oceanology.
Oceanology. Theology books.
Not theology, but
no, the spaceology.
Yep.
I was obsessed with the dragonology book to the point where I also had the accompanying books that go. There's a field guide that goes with it with the story.
Too, yeah.
Loved those. Would state with my friends that I saw them in trees and in forests. I could
a good solid play pretend.
Such a solid imaginary. All of my imaginary friends were dragons.
Hell yeah.
Dragons are horses because that was the kind of kid that I was.
I also had imaginary horse friends.
I was my brother.
I was not a horse girl, but I had imaginary horse friends.
I was a horse girl. So I'm going to give the definition that I picked out. It's off of the Wikipedia page for dragons, which is just... Listen, when you're talking about fantasy creatures,
I'm gonna interrupt you because I am gonna say if anyone comes at me and says that Wikipedia is not a valid source, go away. Because here's the thing. Wikipedia is not the Wikipedia of when I was in middle school when literally anybody could edit it and they could make it to dragons are butt monsters and then that be on
everything
there for
requires
weeks
a
at time.
citation now.
There's citations, they fact check you. And it's also a great jumping off point. Of
Yeah.
like, oh, you can find other resources here.
Yeah, it's a great way to find other citations because you can go to their, like, here's where we got these sources from,
Right.
and then you can go to that, and then if you want to cite that rather than Wikipedia itself, cool, do
Go
that.
for it.
Right.
Anyway, per Wikipedia,
Thank you.
a dragon is a magical, legendary creature that appears in the folklore of multiple cultures worldwide. So truly, there is a dragon story in every culture,
Which is so cool.
which is, I think, why it is such a fun mythical beast. It's different than a regional one. I think this is the most multicultural being that I see. You see it in television and movies and books and on T-shirts and at, Ren Fair. You see it everywhere. You see it in cultural performances. You see, like, there's depictions of dragons almost everywhere you go these days.
Yeah.
And even not now, has been for millennia.
Right.
So I'm going to go over a couple of classifications of dragons,
Cool.
and these are kind of per Western culture. And then I'm going to go through the folklore of a couple of different places just to show the differences in dragon lore across the world. Because
You're giving us like a delightful overview.
yeah,
Dragons this time.
yeah, I am. And then I'm
Which
going to
is great.
go into some like of our more pop culture
Oh, cool.
dragon stuff, like where we see them or where they're commonly found nowadays. And then my favorite cultural dragon books, movies, pieces, kinds of things.
Okay.
So that's kind of the
roadmap.
of today's episode.
That's our outline.
That's our outline. In Western culture, there are kind of 4 main classifications of the word dragon, and I use that in like quotation marks because it's 4 different names. So you have dragon, which is 2 wings, 4 legs.
2 wings, 4 legs.
So you've got 4 distinct limbs and then 2 wings.
And then also wingies.
And then also wingies. You have, I say wyvern, other people say wyvern.
Yeah.
That is 2 wings, 2 legs. So no front dudes.
No arms.
No arms.
Arms are wings.
Arms are wings.
Got it.
And usually with those, they tend to have the hooked wing tips because that's what they use for climbing. You don't.
Like
so,
Hook Fang and How to Train Your Dragon.
or like
Who is a wyvern, fun fact.
the
Hungarian horntail and Harry
yes,
Potter.
thank you.
You're welcome.
You could see
I
where
saw
my
what
brain
you
was
were-
going.
I saw the scene in your head.
When the dragon, the
was
horntail is
climbing
climbing
up
the castle, that is a distinct wyvern wyvern body.
Mm-hmm.
You have a worm, WYRM, worm,
Weird.
which is 2 wings, no legs.
It's a worm with wings.
It is literally just a fire breathing head with wingy bits. Maybe not fire breathing,
That's the
but
scariest one for
that
me.
one makes me heebies. It gives me
I don't-
heebies because it
Heebies
doesn't
and
have
jeebies.
it doesn't have legs, and that
I don't
really
like things
bothers
without
me.
legs. And what's weird is I don't mind a snake, but now it can fly.
Yeah, the flying
Yeah.
aspect, adding the wings, but still not having like a leg limb, really irks me.
And big.
And big,
Because dragon size.
dragon big, and then you have a drake, DRAKE, is 0 wings, 4 legs. So just a ground dude.
That's just the
Big.
dinosaur.
It's just a dinosaur. It's just a big old lizard. So going through some folklore, prevalent dragon cultures, we're gonna start in Egypt.
A good place to start.
Great place to start.
Is it the earliest dragons?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
If we're going in order of dragon lore, Egypt is the earliest we see a dragon folklore tale.
Got it. Okay.
So there's Apep, 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 Apep.
It's Egyptian?
It's Egyptian.
Probably Apep.
Apep.
Probably.
Listen, we're gonna forgive me now. I tried real hard with these pronunciations,
Yeah, and it's
but
been
just
a minute since you looked at them.
it
so
is. But
no
you
no
know.
judgment here. We all try our best.
so it resides folklorically. It resides in the Duat, which is their version of like the river Styx between the known world and the underworld.
Okay.
Is what the Duat is. The Brimner Rind Papyrus from 310 BC depicts the setting sun mythology, which is where Apep comes from. He's said to be, they're said to be the height of 8 men. The head is made of flint. Thunderstorms and earthquakes were caused by Apep's roar. So the roar of him was so loud that that's what would cause weather phenomena. Solar eclipses were said to be Apep attacking Ra during the day. So he was
that's
so
cool.
large that he would block out Ra's sun.
That's neat.
Disney.
And he was defeated by Set. That's Apep. So he's one of our earliest
Our earliest dragon.
dragons. So, I mean, if you're talking 310. Nehebkau? Nehebkau?
Cow is how I'd end that.
Nehebkau.
Yeah.
He guarded the Duat. He aided Ra against Apep. So if you're talking about good versus evil in mythology,
We have dueling dragons.
we're dueling dragons. He was so large that the entire earth rested on his coils. So we'll get into the Norse culture later, but similar to like the Jormungandr folklore of it, the spine of the earth. Larger than that lore even, saying the whole earth was resting on him. Then we have Denwin. He was made of fire.
Oh.
Which I think is really neat.
Fire dragon.
Dragon
made of fire.
Dragon made of fire.
Breathing fire.
He almost killed the entire Egyptian pantheon in his mythology.
Oh, wow.
And I have not read through all of these stories fully, so I don't know how. I'm assuming with fire since he's made of it, but
that would be logical.
God still burns sometimes.
They do.
And then he was defeated by Pharaoh, which is how they confirmed the divine right to rule. That's how they determined Pharaoh the Pharaoh has the divine right to rule, because they defeated Denwin.
Oh, that's
okay.
In mythology.
I like that. Neat. That's fun.
Then moving into Asiatic cultures, we have from Mesopotamia, they have both benevolent and malevolent characters, dragons. In their poetry, the great kings are compared to Usumgal, which is a serpentine dragon. Tiamat also comes from the Mesopotamian culture. A lot of people modern day are going to know that from Dungeons and Dragons, which is
real.
But she is real from real culture. I don't know that her stat block is real, but the folklore of her does come from Mesopotamia.
No, the Mesopotamians created that stat block. They wrote everything down. They actually invented D&D.
Yeah, they nailed it. Sometimes Tiamat is described as serpentine. Other times she's described having horns and tails and penetrable hide. So her folklore varies a little bit. Obviously, if you're talking about Mesopotamia, you're talking about another really ancient culture where, as archaeologists are interpreting what we've gathered from their culture, we don't always interpret correctly.
Right.
So then we have Levant, which is where the Leviathan in the Bible comes from. So the story of the Leviathan, one of them, there's two main ones that I picked out. There's Psalm 74, verses 13 and 14. And it said, "It was you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the monster in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of the Leviathan and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert." Talking about God defeating the Leviathan. And I'm using the NIV, New International Version of the Bible for those people that care. The other Bible passage that mentions the Leviathan that I picked out is Job 41, 1 through 34. It sounds like a lot. It's not that long. I'm going to read it real quick, though. It says, "Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement with you for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of it like a bird or put a leash on it for the young women in your house? Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it up among merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength, and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares opens the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck. Dismay goes before it. The folds of its flesh are tightly joined. They are firm and immovable. Its chest is hard as rock, as hard as a lower millstone. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. The sword that it reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotted wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Sling stones are like chaff to it. A club seems to it but a piece of straw. It laughs at the rattling of the lance. Its undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves behind a glistening wake. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is a king over all that are proud. Which I think is a pretty killer Bible verse or a Bible, story.
Yeah, no, that's pretty killer. I like that's a really cool description.
I also like that it does describe it as a fire-breathing beast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In the Bible.
It gives
in the
gives
Bible.
in the Bible. It's giving a very distinct. This is what it looks like.
It is
and
impenetrable.
It is
you
impenetrable.
cannot stab it.
It
It's
is
got
not.
It's like double armored. It has shields on its back. You cannot hurt it.
It's like I am the only one that can defeat this kind of being.
I, the Lord.
I, Lord. So I just thought that was a really neat.
That is cool. I've never
that,
heard
that you because I think a lot of people are going, well, fantasy background. I'm a pastor's kid. So I was raised
child of the church.
I am. But I think often when you talk about fantasy creatures, people are like, well, they can't exist in the Bible or in biblical text. So I think reminding people that no, a lot of your standard fantasy characters, there is lore, there is biblical text to them, there is folklore behind them. They are not made up for other cultures. They are in
the lore of the Lord.
So
everybody's lore has dragons.
Everybody, even Christianity.
Even Christianity.
So I just thought it was a really cool, obviously everything is very serpentine with dragons. It's kind of the thing, but I thought it was a really neat text. So that was kind of our Asiatic
Thank you for reading
cultures.
it all to us.
Yeah, of course. Moving into China, which is I think people the depiction of a Chinese dragon is much different than the look of a European or kind of your Mesopotamian and your Egyptian dragon. Again, very serpentine, long. It says it has the wings. It breathes fire, but it doesn't talk a lot about limbs. Extra limbage. It talks about them kind of very just serpentine.
They're worms.
There's worms. China, dragons are associated with good fortune. They're really common. You see them all over everything in Chinese culture. The Chinese dragon is the highest ranking animal of their animal hierarchy. If you don't know what, I'm the year of the tiger.
Is it the first of the zodiac? Of the Chinese zodiac?
However they rank their zodiac, it is the highest in their hierarchy.
Neat.
The legend is, there's a legend that Fu Si, HSI, was crossing the Low River when he saw the Lungma, which is a horse dragon.
Ooh.
It has 7 dots on the face, 6 dots on the back, 8 on the left flank, 9 on the right flank. In amazement, he drew a picture, including the dots, and later used the dots as letters to invent Chinese handwriting.
Oh.
Like the written language for China.
That's cool.
Dragons are said to have power over rain. Droughts are said to be caused by laziness. Like the dragons are being lazy. That's why we don't have the rain. There's a lot of customs that revolve around dragons. So the Spring Festival, just to name a couple, the Spring Festival, the Lantern Festival, and Lunar New Year. So Lunar New Year is where you're going to see like the dragon dance, which if you have never gotten to see that in person, it is a beautiful, amazing cultural performance.
I've never seen it in person, but I've seen videos of it.
They had one come to campus for Lunar New Year this past year. They had dragon dancers come.
Oh, that's fun.
They had 2 different dragons. It was a dueling dragons dance. It was so truly, it's really loud because we were inside and there's like the drums that go with it. It was so amazing to see, and that's like obviously a very short dragon. You can see those that have in parades and stuff. They have them that are just tens of people long, and the athleticism that goes into doing the dragon dances, insanity. Those people in such good shape. That is so hard to do. Korea and Japan have very similar customs to China.
That makes sense.
There weren't enough, and listen, people can get mad at me if they want to. There was not enough distinct differences for me to write down stuff for each of them. A lot of their mythology was very similar. Customs wise, they celebrate them similarly, not to culture mash. But
this is also one of those things that like you're doing kind of an overview of the concept of dragons. If somebody at some point wanted to cover a specific dragon,
I could
100% could.
I could have covered one type of dragon and done an entire episode,
or one specific dragon.
Yeah,
so what you've provided here is like a good overview of what you are providing. You're not done yet. Like is a good overview of like this is what dragons can be.
Yeah. Big broad strokes,
which is delightful.
So moving kind of into. We're moving westward.
Okay.
So in Wikipedia, this was in the European kind of block. I would not necessarily call this Europe, but it's fine. It's Greek. We're going to Greek, to the Greece.
I would also categorize those as a separate kind of like not. It is part of Europe.
I would say like the Mediterranean.
Right. I would say because it's going to be different, very, very different culturally than what we think of when we think of European.
Yeah.
Which is
So
like
I'm
France
just
and
that's
Spain.
why I'm caveating.
England,
Scotland. The Wikipedia called it European. I'm going to call it
Mediterranean.
Thank you. My brain just completely lost that word.
I saw it.
So in the Iliad, Agamemnon has a blue dragon. There's a motif or a blue dragon motif on his sword belt, and he has a 3-headed dragon on his breastplate.
Cool.
So you see those in Theogony. Zeus battles Typhon, which is a 100-headed serpent that breathes fire, and then everybody's favorite, the Hydra, was defeated by Heracles. Hydra cut off one head. Multiple take its place. Not like the Hydra of Marvel. That's an octopus. They don't know how mythology works.
The picture of the Hydra for Marvel is one head, many leg,
which is an octopus.
Not normal amount of legs, many head.
Which,
and
also,
an octopus.
Truly, the Disney version of Hercules, which is the Roman version of that demigod, does a good job of depicting the Hydra.
Right. They do a pretty good job.
They do a pretty good job
making the Hydra look scary.
And
it does do the cut off a head to more grow back in its place.
Uh-huh.
I cannot imagine how hard that was to animate.
I'm
all
just saying
heads.
from an animation standpoint, they did a really good job.
It's
They did a
fantastic.
great job. That movie's a masterpiece.
Did it have wings?
No.
Okay. It is Drake.
It's a Drake.
Okay.
It's a Drake.
Thank you.
Bunch of heads, body, tail.
Yeah.
No wings.
No wing.
The one in Disney's Hercules. I don't know if the actual Hydra in Greek mythology.
I don't think
had
I've
wings.
ever.
I don't think it did.
I don't think it did.
so.
I didn't think so.
The Hydra, I think, is the kind of, in my opinion, the classic version of a Drake, version of a dragon.
That makes sense.
So Hydra was defeated by Heracles. I'm sure there are others in Greek mythology because the Greeks had a gajillion monsters, and
That's true.
There's so much mythology there. Moving into Norse mythology. So first is Nidhogger, which is a dragon that gnawed on Yggdrasil, which is the world tree.
Don't chew on the tree.
And then you've got Jormungandr, which is the world serpent in Norse mythology. Thor fished for him with an ox head and then smashed his head with Mjolnir to defeat him. There's also folklore that has to do with Jormungandr and Ragnarok, the end of the world. There's a lot. Jormungandr's a big deal.
Yeah.
In Norse mythology, you'll see a lot of different. I could do an entire episode on him by himself, and I would probably not do it justice.
It might. Someone might.
Someone might. It may not be me.
It might happen.
And then moving into kind of our medieval or modern kind of dragons, you see a lot with King Arthur. There are dragons heavily prevalent, kind of your standard Welsh dragon, which is your 4 legs, 2 wings. That's kind of what I would say your common modern day dragon depiction is.
Picture
For
a
the
dragon.
most part. Picture
Probably
a dragon.
a medieval dragon.
Probably that. Anything you see on a tapestry from feudal Europe,
Probably that.
probably
kind of
that
dragon.
style of dragon. So the King Arthur mythos, tons of dragons involved in that. You also have Saint George and the Dragon, which is a very common European myth.
I actually have some block print
Yeah.
pieces that were done. I only have 2 of the 3, which is a huge bummer because the artist did not come back to the Renaissance fair that I was buying them at, and he was finishing the 3rd piece. So I have one that is St. George and the dragon squaring off, and then the other one is the dragon from his perspective, like from St. George's point of view.
Ooh.
And then the 3rd piece was going to be St. George from the dragon's view, but I never was able to get the 3rd one. But I have the first 2, and I love them. They're a really fun little art piece that I've got in my room.
So that's kind of the overview of dragons from different cultures, if we're following our little roadmap. Moving into dragons kind of in modern media, I'm going to start with my favorite dragon book series.
I'm not surprised.
If anybody, I was like, anybody that knows me knows exactly what I'm going to talk about. It is truly my absolute most favorite book series. It's called The Dragon Riders of Pern. It's by Anne McCaffrey. I would say it's a combination of sci-fi and fantasy as you read through the series. It's a 25 book series. I know that sounds like a lot.
Jesus.
It's well worth it.
There are plenty of fantasy series that are longer than that.
I
Don't
know.
worry.
So
Lots of and they're not super long.
no, they're pretty short novel. A lot of the ones my dad has all of them from when he was a kid. Those are the ones I grew up reading.
Yeah.
A lot of them are kind of paperback sized. In the Dragon Riders of Pern book, not to really spoil, but kind of give a background because she has like her prologue is like a chunky bitch of history. The way the world structure comes, they're on Pern is a planet. Earth was evacuated for whatever reason. So you're coming from a really high science, high functioning society and then retreating back to kind of a more feudal kind of society. So in the world of Pern, they have weirs, which are what they kind of, in the mountains, they have the dragons. The dragons were actually a scientific creation to fight a phenomena that occurs on Pern called thread. They call it threadfall. It is silvery strings that come off of a orbiting star. They call it the red planet. As it gets close enough in its orbit to Pern, it drops these silvery threads that fall like rain on Pern. Those threads will kill you. They burn through organic matter. So when the original people escaping Earth were settling Pern, they built houses out of a plastic-like material or glass or those kinds of things. And the thread was breaking through those materials and killing people.
Oh, no.
And thread is only destroyed by, it can't penetrate rock, it disintegrates in water, or it can be burned by fire. So the dragons in that series were actually, and you don't learn this until a ways in, but they were created to defeat thread. So they come up with, they call them the dragon stones, but when the red star in its orbit, the red planet, no, the red star in its orbit, you can see it in the stones. That's when you know when a passing of threadfall is going to start happening because it's due to the orbit cycle. It's not constant, but it's constant enough. So when the series first starts off, they have been in this non-threadfall cycle. So people have been lax in letting greenery grow in their, not in the weirs, but in the like villages and stuff. Because everything else is made of, all of their stuff is made out of stones, or they're in the mountains, like they've built into the mountains. That's where it's starting in that series, and the dragons make a resurgence because a threadfall spell starts again.
Right.
Anyway, in that series, it's either a rider or the owner. In some cases, when I'm going to talk about the other thing that it can be, but in that case, it's an owner. It's a telepathic bond with dragons. They call it impression in the books. Once you impress upon a dragon, it's a lifelong bond. It only changes in that series. Like, people who lose their dragons tend to go crazy. Like, the loss of the dragon means kind of like the loss of your mind, the loss of yourself. And there's a name change that goes with it. So one of the characters, the son of one of the characters, his name as a child is Felessan, Felssan or something like that. When he becomes a rider, or when you become a rider, your name is shortened with an apostrophe. So the main male's character in the first couple books is named Flar, F''Lar.
Oh.
It's kind of how that name structure changes as a rider.
Gotcha.
You also have fire lizards, which are, even in that culture, kind of mythological up until a certain point in the books where they become more common, like commonly found. And they are I would kind of deem them more wyvern-like, but like small. They're like,
Okay.
I would say they're probably like forearm, like elbow to finger kind of length.
They're little guys.
They're pretty little. So that's where I was saying it's either the rider or the owner. You obviously can't ride a lizard that is the length of your arm, kind of.
Try.
You can try.
Ouch.
So there are varying colors in these the color hierarchy is the same for your standard dragons and your fire lizards in this book series. You have gold, which are queens. They're the largest dragons in the hierarchy. They're 40 to 45 feet long. They're the only fertile females.
Oh.
Okay.
So queens laying eggs are a big deal. It is the only way you can continue generationally. They're the rarest. That's less than 1% of the total dragon population.
How many babies are these queens having?
They're clutching, so it's egg clutches.
Got it.
They're dominant over all of other colors. All non-gold dragons will obey a queen, even over their rider's wishes.
Oh.
The eggs that hatch, there are gold eggs. That's how you know it's another queen dragon being hatched.
Cool. So the egg itself will be gold.
Yes, and they're larger than the other eggs. In this occurrence, queen dragons impress hetero female women, and that's because of the mating element. Because in this story also,
if your dragon
are fucking, your riders are fucking.
Oh.
That's how this works. A mating flight is for both
Both
parties.
of you. Both of you are involved.
So that's
why I hope that you like the guy that your dragon.
That's actually the whole.
Dragon is interested.
That's actually kind of the whole thing with in the first book is it's the queen, the girl that impresses this new queen dragon, her and this main guy trying to
fuck.
No, they do fuck. Anyway. If dragons are mating, the riders are mating. So in the first book, it's a lot of like trying to figure out their relationship outside of the dragons. Anyway.
Got it.
Because there's not. Yes. But I think culturally, because you know if you're being chosen to be a dragon rider of some variety, you're going to be. And they're in that
you
same story.
You are going to be having sex with the people who are riding the dragons that your dragons want to have sex with.
In that same story, it's a competition. The mating flight is competition. It is the fastest male dragon catches the queen. So they're in that same story. Yes, for a mating flight, those two people will sleep together, but they may not have any kind of relationship outside of that. Like there's kind of that, we know this is a compulsory thing. There's not actual feelings tied to this.
It's one of those things that it's like, in this culture, that's not weird.
Yeah.
For us, that's wild.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But in that culture,
but if
that's
you're reading,
just a thing that you do.
Yeah. So like culturally in the story, it would like if you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay,
There's
fine.
no like emotional thing necessarily
Correct.
tied up with, oh, your dragon caught my dragon, which means they have to mate, which means that we also have to do that.
Sex in this culture is very.
There's no emotional thing tied up with it.
So anyway, moving forward, the next color down in the hierarchy is bronze. They're the largest males, 35 to 45 feet long. Approximately 5% of all dragons. Bronzes almost always end up mating with queens, but due to the lack of queen mating flights, the other female dragon color is green. They will often, but their clutches just aren't viable.
That's sad. So they still have eggs, they just don't get to have babies out of them? That's so sad.
It's really sad.
It's like chickens.
It's like chickens.
Yeah, but they're just fertilized. They've mated.
Chickens,
if there's a rooster, they're going to have baby chickens in them.
Right, but like it's like if they're just sterile. They're just sterile eggs.
I know, that just makes me sad.
You
so
get
anyway,
big omelet.
Anyway, Bronzes will often mate with greens, especially if they've like lost a gold mating flight. Like if they were competing and they lost,
Consolation prize, the
basically.
green dragon.
So the senior bronze rider of a weir is determined by who mates the senior gold dragon, and their rider is always a het male.
Got it.
Then you move to brown dragons. They're the next largest, 30 to 40 feet long. 15% of all dragons, even in the storyline, they do occasionally mate with queens. It's just really rare because they're not as fast as the bronzes. All riders are male for browns. Most het, but some bi or mask presenting people will impress browns.
Gotcha. It's gotta be masculine, but not necessarily a straight man.
Correct.
To ride a brown dragon.
Then you
It's kind of an
have
ugly dragon color. It makes sense that the boys get the ugly dragon color.
blues are the smallest male dragons, 24 to 30 feet long. 30% of all dragons, they're agile. They, stamina-wise, can last through an entire thread fall without having to like take a break as long as there's not injury.
Oh, damn.
Some riders, some blue riders are the ones that train new riders, just because of their stamina in flight. They can do the longer like training flights and those kinds of things. Riders are typically gay or bi. Some are het, and then a lesbian could also impress a blue dragon.
This is the queer dragon.
It's curvy.
This is hey, Chris. Remember earlier when I was asking what your favorite color was, and you said blue?
Yeah.
Ayo.
The blue dragon is your dragon.
Gay.
So green is the smallest normal color, 20 to 24 feet long. They're 50% of the population. They're female. They are infertile due to having to so in order for these dragons to breathe fire, they ingest something called firestone. And that kind of sparks it off. But because of the firestone ingestion, so normally queens don't fight in battle.
So they don't breathe fire.
So they don't breathe fire.
Got it.
Greens are a battle dragon. They do ingest firestone,
so
which makes them
a reason.
Yes, so it makes them infertile, but they can flame. They're super valuable in fighting thread because they're really agile. They, but they lack stamina, which is fine. And so they fly in shifts. So you'll have 2 or 3 shifts of green dragons through a thread fall. And originally greens only impressed girls. But due to disaster and plague, they needed women to repopulate. So they began in impressing. Oh, that says gays. I thought I said guys. The gays. But in the 9th pass, which is where the book kind of starts, they begin impressing females again because there's been a resurgence in population with the lack of threadfall. There's a white dragon. In this series, there's only one.
And you said this is green is the last of the normal dragons. So this is a different kind of dragon?
Kind of. Okay. So Ruth is
Ruth.
He's a boy. That's a boy.
Ruth?
RUTH? Yeah, Ruth.
Like from the Bible?
Yeah.
And like, it's a boy?
Like baby Ruth.
Yeah. So he's only one dragon. His rider's name is Jacksum. He's a
Jacksum with an
Jacksum.
M?
Yeah.
So it's like Jackson but with an M at the end?
Yes.
Great.
Ruth is assumed sterile. His storyline is interesting. It's the 3rd book of the series. Jackson actually breaks Ruth out of his shell. So there was like a hatching problem as Ruth was trying to.
In his shell.
Yeah. So Ruth is smaller than most other dragon colors. His story is very interesting. But yes, there's only one of him.
I wonder what color he was supposed to be.
I don't know. They don't ever. There's
like if he was supposed to, like if because he had to get broken out of his shell, he hadn't finished developing all the way yet, and if he was supposed to be a blue or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
That would be
and then
Anne McCaffrey, get on it.
So she did.
I was about to say she's not with us anymore.
Oh no.
This book series again is from like the 70s.
It's
was
old.
when it was being written,
which also explains the
yeah.
The sex of it all.
So the difference in dragons versus fire lizards, dragons can only impress one person. Obviously, you have a size difference. Oh. Fire lizards you can multi-impress. So in my favorite sub-trilogy of this book series, it's called the Harper Hall trilogy. Mm-hmm. It focuses on a girl that plays music, loves to play music.
Is her name Harper?
No, her name is Minelly.
Lame.
Mentally,
Why is it called the Harper Hall trilogy?
because harpers are the career that
like a
teaches.
musician, a harper.
Like a harper.
So they actually have all of the teaching songs and ballads. All of the early education is done by harpers.
Great.
It is a male, because again, think about the kind of feudalism of all of it. It is a male-dominated career. Minnie is the first harper's apprentice that is female.
Ooh, good for her.
So she starts in her series,
Feminism.
when she starts, she's 15. Her story is wonderful. Then she accidentally impresses in a thread fall. She comes upon a clutch of fire lizards' eggs that are getting ready to hatch.
And she's all of their mom.
And to prevent them from flying out and dying in the thread, she starts feeding them. Well, that's how you impress fire lizards, through like touch and then food.
Oh my god.
So she ends up impressing 9 fire lizards.
She's got 9 babies now.
Yeah.
Those are your kids now.
Mentally. And so unlike like a dragon and a rider, it's a telepathic connection with like actual like you can do actual like word speaking
Yeah, you can
communication, talk to each other. The impression for fire lizards is more kind of emotion based or like picture based. There's not really like communication in a vocal sense. It's more like an emotional feeling, or like showing pictures of something like you know, like
I get what you're saying.
like,
Like you can't say like, "Hey, fire lizard, go get my water." And it hears, "Go get your water."
Well,
but you could be like, "Hey, fire lizard, picture of water cup."
No. You can do that. I'm saying what you're going to get from a fire lizard
It's
is not going to be
words.
language. It's not going to be words.
It's more like crude language.
It's more like
imagery and
imagery.
emotion.
Yeah.
So it's like think of like kind of like a toddler, where it's not. They're going to
Broad
show you
concepts
broad
rather than
concept, yeah,
specific
and
words.
very
yeah.
emotion heavy. So
Yeah.
the eyes of a fire lizard turn colors based on the emotion that they're feeling. So the color tells you how
Okay.
they're feeling.
So far, I have not wanted any of these dragons. I mean, the green one sounds kind of cool, but also
I
I'd just be
desperately
sad.
want
I
a
want a
fire
fire
lizard.
lizard.
I
so bad.
desperately want a fire lizard.
Per
Sick.
9 fire lizards, our Beauty is a gold. She's a queen fire lizard. Then you have Rocky and Diver, who are both bronzes.
The names are so cute.
So in this culture, the elderly, everybody, like anybody that's kind of old, are referred to as aunties and uncles.
Cute.
Cute. Love that.
So she has uncle, who's a blue, and then auntie 1 and auntie 2, who are both green, and they chatter like old women. Like she explicitly describes them as like chattering like old women. And then you have Brownie, Lazy Bones, and Mimic, who are all brown. And Lazy Bones is straight up a lazy
bones.
He's so lazy.
Oh my god!
Like he likes to just
Those
be.
names are so
he
cute.
likes to flop and just be fed. Anyway, desperately, everything I've ever wanted. Yes, I would love to be a dragon rider. More than anything, I want a fire lizard.
It's like
It's just.
do you?
And then they don't.
Can you
they
have
don't.
both?
No. Yes, you can.
So you can be a writer and also have a lizard.
Correct.
Oh.
So
What if you were
the other
riding
thing.
your dragon and your lizard was with you.
So the other thing that these dragons and the fire lizards can do, they do
Mhm.
this form of transportation that they call going between, and you can do this with time and location. So it's kind of this void space, but you kind of flash in and flash out. So they call it's a transport, kind of a teleportation.
Oh my god.
So anyway, fire
right,
lizards.
I forgot there's an element of sci-fi here, not
Yeah.
just fantasy.
Yeah. So fire lizards go between. Dragons with riders can also go between. Between is very cold. You know that you're on, like, if you know you're on the dragon with other people, you can't feel them anymore. Like, so like if the 3 of us were all riding a dragon together, I would know that I'm like holding on to you, but I wouldn't be able to feel you necessarily. So that's kind of how my long spiel about my very favorite book series is that. But that's kind of the differences there. Obviously, you see them in Game of Thrones. There's kind of a whole,
technically the dragons in Game of Thrones wyverns.
Yes.
Aren't they all wyverns?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least
I could be
in the-
wrong.
At least in the TV series.
In the show, right?
So there's also How to Train Your. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I have watched the series. I enjoyed it. It was fine. I watched it specifically because I wanted to see all the costumes in the original
Super
series.
valid.
Because like God, they're so good.
Yeah.
The dragons were fine. Like I said earlier, always question, what are they eating? What are they feeding those things?
Yeah.
They're so fucking
in
big.
I will say in
Pern.
Dragon Riders.
Oh, okay.
They do explicitly. There are sheep and other livestock animals that are specifically herded for feeding dragons.
That's
yes.
cool.
Okay, that's neat.
I love it when there's an answer.
And then
I want an
fire
answer.
lizards. They all eat any kind of meat. So they talk about other game scraps will be given to like cut up and given to the fire lizard.
Okay, so like dogs.
No. Like they have.
He's saying you feed them like dogs.
Yes,
Yeah.
you feed them like
Yeah,
dogs.
you feed
Not
them
we're
like
feeding
not.
them
I
dogs.
was like,
Yeah.
we're not feeding them dogs. They'll cut up meat for them or like fish or things like that. So
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
like a pet, they would feed them.
Yeah.
Table scraps.
Table scraps.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Anything
cute.
that's like red meat or protein based. But yes,
I
there is explicit
Want a fire
like
lizard.
sheep, goats, or that their version of, because she's renamed some of those things.
Right.
Like
So they are raising livestock to be fed to the dragon.
yes.
Yeah.
And
I love
each kind of hold. A weir protects a certain number of holds
Mm-hmm.
or forts.
Yeah.
And in return of those protections, they
They
tithe.
feed the dragon.
They give part money, whatever else they're raising, or crops. So like they have a portion that goes to the weir.
Oh, amazing.
So
That's cool.
other books that I will mention, you have Fourth Wing, which is a romance series that is out right now, but it is about dragons. The romance is
People are obsessed with that book
It's-
series right now
it's
on
really
TikTok.
fun fact,
Interesting.
I read the first. It's fantastic.
Is it good?
It's good from not just a romance perspective, but
Okay.
also like a fighting
Yeah.
world.
People love it. Like
It's really good.
there's like a hoodie going around on TikTok that people are like in love with.
It's very.
Oh.
I will say it's very good from more than just an I like romance books perspective
yeah.
and I like dragons perspective. Like apart from
It's a
those two
good
things,
book
it is a
series.
good book. She did a good job
Okay.
on this
I
book.
love that.
Okay.
Same
Recommendation.
similar thing. It's another kind of telepathic connection once. And in that book series, the dragon picks their rider.
Oh, cool.
And so once they've picked you, then you can telepathically connect with them.
Oh, neat.
And then you've got this is another combo book movie, which the movies did not do as good of a job, but we're going to forgive them because they're still good, which is How to Train Your Dragon.
The movies are amazing,
But
but they are not what happens in the book. But take them separately, and they're amazing
Yes.
movies.
So How to Train Your Dragon, if you ever read the book series, it is 7 books, and they're very good. It is different.
They are very good.
I will say that book series, I think, does the best job of diversifying their dragons. Fourth Wing does a good job of having diversity in dragons as well. But I think if you are looking at kind of the physical differentiators in dragons, How to Train Your Dragon has a lot, and they go into details about why each dragon is the way they are.
Right.
And those are very different than your Fab 4 OG kind of styles of dragons.
Uh-huh.
They have a lot more magic power or ability kind of thing, whereas the dragons in Dragon Riders are meant for protection. And then the same thing, the dragons in Fourth Wing are kind of a combination of protectors and just a beast that lives off on its own. So it's kind of got a combo ecosystem thing going there. Aragon is another good dragon based book series. That is I would say that is your most European dragon book. That's going to be that Inheritance series, which just had a new book come out last Christmas. Murdaugh came out.
Fascinating.
So Christopher Paolini writes that. It is my husband's favorite book series.
It also makes sense that he read Aragon because that was the if you were reading dragon
that was
books,
that was the boy
book.
That was the boy
that
book.
was the boy book if you were reading dragon books.
Also,
because me and Harrison are the same age. When we were in middle school, that was
the book.
boy book.
Well, and
You know-
also as somebody that's a couple of years younger than you guys, so for me, like elementary school, we
Right.
were still really, we were really into my brother and I, and I have
forget how much older than you guys I am.
as a twin, and having specifically a twin brother.
Right.
Alex and I were reading similar style of books,
Yeah.
but different. So like Alex really enjoyed Aragon. I really struggled with Aragon. It did not connect with me the same way that Dragon Riders did.
Right.
Alex could give two shits about the Dragon Riders of Pern. Honestly,
sense.
he does not enjoy that book series, even though like besides the trilogy books that I read, it is still female centric, but there's still a lot of like male heavy character usage. And then we both enjoyed How to Train Your Dragon. He was also getting into the Forgotten Realms books, which is a D&D book series that has like 70-something books. It's got a gajillion books.
And it has a bunch of dragons.
That also has a bunch of dragons because it's D&D. So he was really into those and like Lord of the Rings. And then we were also reading Harry Potter, and we were reading them kind of in competition because we were really high-level readers, which surprises nobody. But that's where you can kind of like, for me, start to see like where my brother and I started to split as far as like we like the same style of books, but here are the differences in our styles. Also, one of our really cool favoritist people that listens to our podcast, my friend Craig Smith.
Craig.
He writes books. He has 3 books. All of them they're YA fantasy books. They're really good. He has The Princess Knight, which is a prequel book, and then Nothing More Than Zero and Worth Less Than Zero. All
which
of them
are all great titles.
Those are really good.
They're on Amazon. If anybody's interested, they're not very expensive. Take a read. They're also on Kindle Unlimited, if that's your vibe.
They've got dragons.
They're all about dragons.
She wouldn't be mentioning them if they weren't about dragons. This isn't just an ad for Craig.
I'm just clarifying.
It is an ad for Craig, but it's not just an ad for Craig.
Right.
And
I just
also
want to make sure.
And then also similarly, in all of these books, it's the same kind of telepathic communication. So
that's so interesting. That's so common.
No dragon book that I've ever read has there been like, besides like your damsel in distress like TV shows where it's like the dragon talks to the princess from the top of the tower. You know, like the newspaper cartoons. Have you ever seen that?
Right, yeah.
Most of the time that I've seen dragons, it's almost always a telepathic communication, whether it's voluntary or not. It is never just straight like talking to somebody. Movie wise, you've got, like we mentioned, How to Train Your Dragon. Pete's Dragon is another really common
good movie,
which is a great movie. I personally prefer the OG,
the original one.
where he's just a bright green animated
pudgy
2D boy.
Animated dragon.
Yeah, he's just a pudgy boy, and I adore that. Not that the redone one isn't good, but there's a nostalgia for me with the 2D.
That feeling to it.
Dragonheart is another
I love that
fantastic
movie so much.
I love that movie.
No dragon should be voiced by anyone other than Sean Connery ever. God, that movie's so good. Mackenzie hadn't seen that movie until
we made
offensively recently.
I was forced. It was like, you haven't seen this, you're watching it.
No, my mom made me watch that.
And then also
as like a tween.
You've got it.
So good.
You've got dragons in the Lord of the Rings, Smaug. Most commonly seen in The Hobbit, but there's
Isolation of Smaug.
There is other draconic references in Tolkien's writings, because to also talk about a world builder, that man.
Yeah.
And then other places that mention it, we kind of mentioned it, D&D and Pathfinder.
Thank you for mentioning Pathfinder.
Both. And other tabletop
and other
type
TTRPGs.
games.
TTRPGs commonly have draconic references in them. If not things
classic baddie,
like classic baddie's a dragon, and in each one of those iterations, D&D, Pathfinder, other TTRPGs, there's usually a color and ability pairing.
Yeah.
So usually your blue might be lightning, or black. You know, there's a connotation for
silver and ice.
Yeah, there's a connotation for what ability they might have due to their colors. So, like, I would say that's a distinct difference from like books that have dragons in them versus like these TTRPGs, which makes sense because you're doing that from like a stat block for a fight.
Yeah, they've got to have a stat block. So they have to have something cool.
And then, like we mentioned earlier, the ology books, the Dragonology, and all of those, which is just they went into. I would say if you were a child of the generation that we are, they were good at giving similarly kind of this combination overview of dragons, but also like made them feel real. So I will say that, like, similar to what you guys said, I desperately wish dragons were real. And like part of me in my heart, like my little kid heart is like, yes, they absolutely are real. I think more likely somebody in archaeology or historically was finding dinosaur fossil remains. Same thing with a lot of folklore. Didn't know what it was, didn't know how to explain it, and came up with a story to match it. Especially if you're talking about with the way that the folklore is spread across the world, and that it varies so drastically in how they look. If you look at
Right.
Asia and Europe and all of those things, the way that the dinosaurs looked in all those places match similarly to how
Dragons are going to look.
dragons are going to look.
That makes sense.
And when you have wing bones but not wing cartilage, or maybe like a drake may have had wings, and if it was all cartilage, nothing survived, right? Nothing was necessarily, may have fossilized correctly. If you're talking about just an impression fossil, not like bone fossil.
Right. And even then, cartilage doesn't fossilize very well. Like, that's why we only have shark jaw for the most part. We have shark jaws. We do have some that
vertebra
that are vertebrae that are the cartilaginous fossils,
Yeah.
but they're super rare.
But in a lot of paleontology, when you're looking at, I would just say, as much as my little kid heart desperately wants dragons to be real, the masked major, the person that took archaeology classes and did all of those things,
bioarc,
the bioarc, and the
person who's looked at a lot of bones.
you know, that we've, and I would say the three of us, for going through a degree program like that, knowing what I know about bones and fossils and the archaeology and the science behind all of that, logically it's probably dinosaur remains that these early cultures just needed some kind of explanation for, which is really common in a lot of folklore. So I guess, would you learn anything? How do you feel?
I love that you did the, like, okay, so like generally in this area, this is the kind of thing that we're seeing, and in this area, this is the kind of thing that we're seeing. And I really enjoyed that. I am a bit not like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not biased, but like I didn't know some of this already because you had gone over your notes with me beforehand, because you wanted to make sure that you covered everything thoroughly enough. But I think I did learn a lot about your favorite book series.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to anybody that does not care about my favorite book
I did
series.
not know about before now, which is good, because it, like, that kind of in-depth world building around something as simple as the concept of a dragon is always so interesting. And it's one of those things that it's like, oh, I never noticed that in all of these different things, the dragons are always communicating telepathically.
Yeah.
Like, I never would have connected that through line if you hadn't brought that up. Because it is a thing, like, in that series and other series, they're like, oh, yeah, no, they can talk, but not really. Like, they're talking into your brain. I really liked it. I think that, I think I learned a lot about the, like, non-European ones. Like, I didn't know about the other Norse one that you mentioned, whose name I can't remember.
Nidhogger.
Yeah, that one. I didn't know about him at all. The guy who gnawed on Yggdrasil. That's cool. I knew about Jormungandr, but that's because he's our boy.
Yeah,
he's the world serpent.
We know about him.
We know about him. And I do think it's interesting that you pointed out that, like, oh, in the more ancient cultures, they're more, like, snake-like. And then we get into, like, medieval Europe, and they're like, these are four-legged things with wings, and that is what a dragon is now. And then that kind of became the motif from now on, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you talking about your favorite dragon book reminded me of a dragon book that I read in middle school from E.E. Knight. I only read the first one because I borrowed it from
I get
another classmate. And I think about this book every couple months, and I'm like, God, that was so good. It's called Dragon Champion from the Age of Fire series. It looks like there's 6 books in the series. I did take a second to Google it in the middle of the episode because I was like, what was that? But it's about a dragon that is super, super rare and isn't gonna live, like, basically. So, like, it opens, the parents are hatching their clutch of eggs, because in this world it is similar to one of the other series you mentioned, that, like, they are beasties, but they are also sometimes used in, like, protection and whatnot.
Gotcha.
But this one is specifically born like a beastie. He's out in the wild with his parents, and he is hatched out, and he has no scales. All of his brothers and sisters have scales. His parents have scales, and his parents are like, I don't think he's gonna make it. Right. He's soft and squishy, and he's smaller than all of the others. Like, he's the runt.
I too am soft and squishy.
Me too.
But he ends up, like, by the end of the book, something else that was really interesting about this book and, like, the way that they have world built dragons into the book is that they are all born drakes, and then at a certain point.
Like frogs.
Yeah, like frogs. So
That's cool.
they're
They're
all
tadpoles.
Yeah, they're all born no wings, just 4 little leggies. And then at a certain point in their maturity, they start, like, growing wings.
That's so neat.
It's really neat. But at that awkward teenage point where he's like growing wings. He ends up running into like some fucking peasant boy out in the middle of nowhere,
Oh,
and they
become
don't.
best friends.
They eventually become best friends. They don't like each other at the beginning,
Oh no!
but they need each other to
enemies to
survive.
besties.
Yeah.
I need you to survive to besties.
Yeah.
The pipeline.
a take on enemies to lovers, enemies to besties.
Yeah. But by the end of the book, the little peasant boy is like the writer for this dragon and like ends up helping like save
I love
a
that.
town.
I might look that book up.
Yeah, I don't know.
That sounds really good.
It was really good. And
But-
that's what this reminded me of, made me think about
I mean,
that. It's fun.
Like I said, there are, in modern media, there is every depiction of dragon that you could imagine.
everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
They're on T-shirts and lunchboxes and in every form of media that you can imagine. But yeah, I love them. I love them very dearly. So I think that's everything you need to know about dragons. Tune in next week to learn about a different kind of phenomenon. Who knows what it's going to be?
Thanks for listening.
This podcast is for weirdos.
Are you a weirdo?
Thursdays are for the phenomena.